So I had some major technology issues yesterday. You don't want to know. I read the chapter like 3 times, and finally I got a good take, and then I realized that none of the sound worked. I played it back and there was no sound. Anyway, so I didn't really feel like reading it again last night for a 4th time, so I'll read the chapter again today. And on top of that, it's a chapter that is kind of sad. It makes me cry. But anyway, I'm in a different house today. You can see that over there. That's actually a porcelain doll that is mine. I was given it when I was really young. It's similar to, it's really weird. It's similar to the doll that Esperanza got from her father. So today we're gonna read an interesting part of the story where Esperanza faces some real challenges. And I think you're gonna be able to relate with the challenges that she faces. So without further ado, Las cebollas, the onions. "We're here," said Isabel as the truck turned into camp and slowed to a crawl. Esperanza stood up and looked over the cab. They were in a large clearing surrounded by grape fields. Row upon row of white wooden cabins formed long lines connected like bunkhouses. Each cabin had one small window and 2 wooden steps that led to the door. She couldn't help but think that they weren't even as nice as the servants' cabins in Aguascalientes. They reminded Esperanza more of the horse stalls on the ranch than of a place for people to live. A big mountain loomed in the east, framing one side of the valley. Marta jumped out and ran toward some girls who were standing together near the cabins. Esperanza could hear them talking, but they were talking in English. The words sounded hard and clipped, as if they were speaking with sticks in their mouths. They all looked at her and laughed. She turned away, thinking that if Isabel could learn English, then maybe someday she could learn it too. A line of flatbed trucks pulled into a clearing, and campesinos hopped down home from the fields. People called to one another, children ran to their fathers, yelling, "Papi, papi!" Esperanza felt a deep pang. She watched and wondered how she would fit into this world. Isabel pointed to a wooden building off to the side. "That's where they have all the toilets." Esperanza cringed and tried to imagine having no privacy. "We're lucky," said Isabel solemnly. "In some camps, we had to go in ditches." Esperanza looked down at her, swallowed, and nodded, suddenly thankful for something. A foreman came over and shook hands with Juan and Alfonso and pointed to the cabin in front of the truck. The women got out, took the babies, and helped Miguel with the bags. Mamá and Esperanza walked into the cabin that the foreman had pointed to. It had 2 small rooms. Half of the front room was the kitchen with a stove, sink, and counter, and a table and chairs, a pile of wood waiting near the stove. Across the room was a mattress on the floor. The back room had another mattress big enough for 2 people, and a tiny cot. In between the mattress and the cot sat a wooden fruit crate to be used as a night table, its sides touching each bed. Above was another small window. Mamá looked around and then gave Esperanza a weak smile. "Is this our cabin or Hortensia's and Alfonso's?" asked Esperanza, hoping that hers and Mamã's cabin might be better. "We are all together in this cabin," said Mamá. "Mamá, we can't possibly all fit." "Esperanza, they will only give 1 cabin to each man with a family. There's no housing for single women. This is a family camp, so we must have a male head of household to live and work here, and that is Alfonso." Mamá sank to the bed. Her voice sounded tired. "He's told them that we are his cousins, and if anyone asks us, we must say that it's true. Otherwise, we cannot stay. We're next door to Juan and Josefina, so we can adjust the sleeping arrangements. Miguel will sleep next door with them and the babies, and Isabel will sleep here with Alfonso, Hortensia, and us." Miguel came in and set down their valises, then left. Esperanza could hear Alfonso and Hortensia in the next room talking about the camp office. Mamá got up to unpack and began to sing. Esperanza felt anger crawling up her throat. "Mamá, we are living like horses. How can you sing? How can you be happy? We don't even have a room to call our own." The talking suddenly stopped in the other room. Mamá gave Esperanza a long, hard look. She calmly walked over and shut the door to the small room. Sit down, she said. Esperanza sat on the tiny cot, its springs screeching. Mamá sat on the bed opposite her, their knees almost touching. Esperanza, if we had stayed in Mexico and I had married Tío Luis, we would have had one choice, to be apart and miserable. Here we have two choices, to be together and be miserable, or to be together and happy. Mija, we have each other and Abuelita will come. How would she want you to behave? I choose to be happy. So which will you choose? She knew what Mamá wanted to hear. Happy, she said quietly. Do you know how lucky we are, Esperanza? Many people come to this valley and wait months for a job. Juan went to a lot of trouble to make sure we had this cabin waiting for us when we got here. Please, be grateful for the favors bestowed upon us. Mamá bent over and kissed her, then left the room. Esperanza laid down on the cot. A few minutes later, Isabel came in and sat on the bed. Will you tell me what it was like to be so very rich? She looked at Isabel, her eyes anticipating some wonderful story. Esperanza was quiet for a moment, clinging to one possible thought. And then she said, I'm still rich, Isabel. We will only be here until Abuelita is well enough to travel. Then she'll come with her money and we'll buy a big house, a house that Papa would have been proud for us to live in. Maybe we'll buy 2 houses, so that Hortensia, Alfonso, and Miguel can live in one and work for us again. And you can visit us, Isabel. You see, this is only temporary. We will not be here for long. ¿De veras? Asked Isabel. Yes, it's the truth, said Esperanza, staring at the ceiling that someone had covered with newspaper and cardboard. My papa would never have wanted us to live in a place like this. She closed her eyes and heard Isabel tiptoe out of the room and shut the door. The weariness from the days of travel flooded over her, and her mind wandered from people peeing in ditches, to Marta's rudeness, to the horse stalls at El Rancho de las Rosas. How could she be happy or grateful when she had never been more miserable in her life? When Esperanza opened her eyes again, it was almost light, and she heard Mamá, Hortensia, and Alfonso talking in the next room. She'd slept through dinner in the entire night. She smelled café and chorizo. The coffee and sausage made her stomach growl, and she tried to remember when she had last eaten. Isabel was still asleep in the bed next to her, so Esperanza quietly pulled on a long wrinkled shirt and white blouse. She brushed her hair and went into the other room. Good morning, said Mamá. Sit down and eat something. You must be starved. At the table, Hortensia patted her hand. You missed going to the foreman's office last night. We signed the papers to live here. We already have work today. Mamá put a plate of tortillas, eggs, and sausage in front of her. Where did all this food come from? Asked Esperanza. Josefina, said Hortensia. She brought some groceries until we can go to the store this weekend. Esperanza, said Mamá, you and Isabel will be watching the babies while the rest of us work. Alfonso and Juan will be picking grapes, and Hortensia, Josefina, and I will be packing grapes in the sheds. But I want to work with you and Hortensia and Josefina. You're not old enough to work in the sheds, said Mamá, and Isabel is not old enough to watch the babies by herself. If you watch the babies, then Josefina can work, and that's one more paying job between us. We must all do our part. You'll have a camp job, too, sweeping the wooden platform every afternoon, for which they will deduct a little from our rent each month. Isabel can show you what to do later. What's the platform? Esperanza asked. It's the big wooden floor outside in the middle of the camp. Juan said that they use it for meetings and dances, said Mamá. Esperanza stared at her food. She didn't want to be stuck in camp with children. Where's Miguel? She said. He already left for Bakersfield with some other men to look for work at the railroad, said Alfonso. Isabel came out of the bedroom, rubbing her eyes. Mi sobrina, my niece, said Hortensia, hugging Isabel. Go say good morning to your mother and father before we all leave for work. Isabel hugged her and ran next door. Esperanza studied Mamá as she made a burrito de frijoles for lunch and wrapped the soft tortilla filled with pinto beans in paper. She looked different. Was it the long cotton dress and the big flowered apron tied at her waist? No, it was more than that. "Mamá," said Esperanza, "your hair!" Mamma's hair ran down her back in a single long braid, almost touching her waist. Esperanza had never seen Mamá wear her hair that way. It was always done up in her beautiful plaited bun, or when she was ready for bed it was brushed out and flowing. This way, Mamá looked shorter somehow, and not herself. Esperanza didn't like it. Mamá reached up and stroked the back of her head. She seemed embarrassed. I figured out that I can't wear a hat with my hair on top of my head, and this makes more sense, does it not? After all, I'm going to work today, not to a fiesta." Then she hugged Esperanza. "We must go now. The trucks leave at 6:30 to take us to the sheds. Take good care of the babies and stay with Isabel. She knows the camp." As the three of them walked out, Esperanza noticed Mamá reaching up, hesitantly touching her hair again. When Esperanza finished eating, she went outside and stood on the front step. Instead of facing another row of cabins, their cabin was in the last row, facing the fields. Straight ahead, across a dirt road, were several chinaberry trees and a mulberry tree that provided deep shade over a wooden table. Beyond the row of trees were grape fields, still lush. To the right, across a grassy field, was the main road. A truck, piled high with produce, drove by, losing a cloud of debris. After the truck passed, the sharp smell told her that they were onions on that truck, the dry outer skins being shredded by the wind. Another truck followed. Again, the smell of onions bit into her senses. It was still early, so the air was cool, but the sun was bright, and she knew it would be hot soon. The hens pecked and poked around the front steps. They must have been happy to be off the train. Esperanza shooed them out of her way as she turned and walked next door. The babies were still in their pajamas. Isabel was struggling to feed Lupe her oatmeal, while Pepe crawled on the floor, splotches of his cereal still stuck to his cheeks. As soon as he saw Esperanza, he reached up for her. "Let's clean them up," said Isabel, "and then I'll show you the camp." First, Isabel took Esperanza to the platform that she was supposed to sweep as part of her job, and she showed her where the brooms were stored. Then they walked through the rows of cabins, each of them with a baby on their hip. As they passed open doors, Esperanza could already smell the beans and onions that some women were already preparing for dinner. Women were dragging big metal wash tubs beneath the shades. A group of young boys kicked a ball up and down the dirt road, stirring up dust. And then a little girl, wearing a man's undershirt as a dress, ran up to Isabel and took her hand. "This is Silvia. She's my best friend. Next week we're going to go to school together." Silvia switched around and grabbed Esperanza's free hand. Esperanza looked down at Silvia's dirty hands. Silvia grinned up at her, and Esperanza's first instinct was to pull her hand away and to wash it as soon as possible. But then she remembered Mamma's kindness to the peasant girl on the train, and Mamma's disappointment in Esperanza. She didn't want Silvia to start crying if she pulled her hand away. She looked around at the dusty camp and thought that, well, it must be hard to keep clean in a place like this. She squeezed Silvia's hand and said, "I have a best friend too. Her name is Marisol, and she lives in Aguascalientes." Isabel introduced Esperanza to two women who were hanging clothes to dry on a long line stretched between the cabins and a tree. The women were Irene and Melina. Irene had long gray hair tied in a tail. Melina was much younger. She didn't look much older than Miguel, and she already had a baby of her own. "We heard the story of how you came from Aguascalientes," said Melina. "My husband's from there. He used to work for Señor Rodriguez." Esperanza's face lit up at the news. "He knew my father since he was a boy. Do you think your husband knew Marisol, Señor Rodriguez's daughter?" Melina laughed. "No, I'm sure he didn't. He was a campesino, a field servant. He wouldn't have known the family." Esperanza felt awkward and didn't mean to make Melina admit that her husband was a servant. But Melina didn't seem to mind. She was recalling other farms that her husband had worked on in Aguascalientes. Isabel pulled on Esperanza's arm. We need to change the babies. As they walked back to the cabin, she said, Irene and Melina are mother and daughter. They come over to talk and crochet with my mother all the time. How do they know about me already? Isabel raised her hand and made fingers tap up and down on her thumb as if a mouth was talking. Everyone in camp knows each other's business. Do you know how to change a diaper? Asked Esperanza when they got back to the cabin. Certainly, said Isabel. I will change them and you can rinse out the diapers. We need to do some laundry too. Esperanza watched as the young girl laid the babies down one at a time, unpinned their diapers, wiped their bottoms clean, and pinned on fresh diapers. Isabel handed Esperanza the smelly bundles and said, Take them to the toilets and dump them, and I'll fill the wash tub. Esperanza held them at arm's length and almost ran to the toilets. Several more onion trucks passed by, their smell accosting her eyes and nose as much as the diapers. By the time she got back, Isabel had already filled 2 wash tubs with water from an outside pipe and was swirling soap around in one of them. A washboard was propped inside. Esperanza went to the wash tub and hesitated, staring into the water. Bits of onion skins floated on the surface of the soapy water. She held a corner of one of the diapers, lightly dipping it in and out of the water, her hand never getting wet. After a few seconds, she gingerly lifted the diaper from the water. Now what? She said. Esperanza, you must scrub them, like this. Isabel walked over, took the diapers, and plunged them into the water up to her elbows. The water quickly became murky. She rubbed the diapers with soap, vigorously scrubbing them back and forth on the washboard, and wrung them out. Then she transferred them to the next tub, rinsing them and wringing again. Isabel shook out the clean diapers and hung them on the line stretched between the chinaberry and the mulberry trees. Then she started washing the clothes. Esperanza was amazed. She'd never washed anything in her life, and Isabel, who was only 8 years old, made it look so easy. Puzzled, Isabel looked at Esperanza. Don't you know how to wash clothes? Well, Hortensia took everything out to the laundry quarters, and the servants, they always... She looked at Isabel and shook her head. Isabel's eyes got bigger, and she looked worried. Esperanza, when I go to school next week, you will be here alone with the babies, and you'll have to do all the washing. Esperanza took a deep breath and said weakly, I can learn. And later today, you must sweep the platform. You do know how to sweep, don't you? Of course, said Esperanza. She'd seen many people sweep. Many times. Many times, she assured herself. Besides, she was already too embarrassed about the washing to admit anything else to Isabel. Isabel sat with the babies while Esperanza went to sweep the platform. The camp was quiet, and even though it was late in the day, the sun was hot. She retrieved the broom and stepped onto the wooden floor. Dried and brittle onion skins were everywhere. In her entire life, Esperanza had never even held a broom. But she had seen Hortensia sweep, and she tried to visualize the memory. It couldn't possibly be that hard. She put both hands near the middle of the broomstick and moved it back and forth. It swung wildly. The motion seemed awkward, and the fine dirt on the wooden planks lifted into a cloud. Onion jackets flew into the air, instead of gathering together in a neat pile like Hortensia's. Esperanza's elbows didn't know what to do, and neither did her arms. She felt streams of perspiration sliding.
Perspiration is a fancy word for sweat.
Sliding down her neck. She stopped for a moment and stared at the broom, as if willing it to behave. Determined, she tried again. She hadn't noticed that several trucks were already unloading workers nearby. Then she heard it. First, a small tittering, and then louder. She turned around. A group of women were laughing at her, and in the middle of the group was Marta, pointing. La Cenicienta! Cinderella! Then she laughed. Burning with humiliation, Esperanza dropped the broom and ran back to the cabin. In her room, she sat on the edge of the cot, her face flushed again at the thought of the ridicule. She was still sitting there, staring at the wall, when Isabel found her. I said I could work. I told Mamá I could help. But I cannot even wash clothes or sweep a floor. Does the whole camp know? Isabel sat down on the bed next to her and patted her back. Yes. Esperanza groaned. I'll never be able to show my face. She put her head into her hands until she heard someone else come into the room. Esperanza looked up to see Miguel, holding a broom and a dustpan. But he wasn't laughing. She looked down and bit her lips so she wouldn't cry in front of him. He shut the door, then stood in front of her and said, How would you know how to sweep a floor? The only thing that you ever learned was how to give orders. That's not your fault. Ansa, look at me. She looked up. Pay attention, he said, his face serious. You hold the broom like this, one hand here and the other here. Esperanza watched. Then you push like this, or pull it toward you like this. Here, you try, he said, holding out the broom. Slowly, Esperanza got up and took the broom from him. He positioned her hands on the handle. She tried to copy him, but her movements were too big. Smaller strokes, said Miguel, coaching, and sweep all in one direction. So she did as he said. Now when you get all the dirt into a pile, you hold the broom down here near the bottom and push the dirt into the pan. Esperanza collected the dirt. See, you can do it. Miguel raised his thick eyebrows and smiled. Someday you might just make a very good servant. Isabel giggled. Esperanza couldn't laugh yet about it, so somberly she said, Thank you, Miguel. He grinned and bowed. At your service, mi reina. But this time his voice was kind. She remembered that he'd gone to look for work at the railroad. Did you find a job? His smile faded. He put his hands in his pockets and shrugged his shoulders. It's frustrating. I can fix any engine, but they'll only hire Mexicans to lay tracks and dig ditches, not as mechanics. I've decided to work in the fields until I can convince someone to give me a chance. Esperanza nodded. After he left the room, Isabel said, He calls you mi reina. Will you tell me about your life as a queen? Esperanza sat on the mattress and patted the spot next to her. Isabel sat down. Isabel, I will tell you all about how I used to live, about parties and private school and beautiful dresses. I'll even show you the beautiful doll that my papa bought me if you will teach me how to pin diapers, how to wash, how to... Isabel interrupted her. But that is so easy. Esperanza stood up and carefully practiced with the broom. It's not easy for me. That's the end of the chapter called Las Cebollas. Thank you for listening to me. It's so fun for me. I hope that it's fun for you to hear the story. And I would love to get some feedback. If you could have your parents send me a dojo message letting me know what's been your favorite part of the story so far. Who's your favorite character? And don't forget to take a look at the questions that I'll post below and discuss them with somebody at home. I'm not going to post any reading tomorrow because tomorrow's Sunday. Starting Monday, it's spring break, but I'm still going to post a reading each day of the week next week. Follow this YouTube channel so that you won't miss a single reading. Have a great spring break, and I'll see you on Monday. Hasta pasta!